Welcome everybody. Hello, thank you for joining us today and welcome to the European Accessibility at Deadline webinar. I'll be hosting today's session. My name is Stephen Kavanagh and I am the Marketing and Events Manager for Purple Tuesday. I am delighted to introduce to you Purple Tuesday's Head of Accessibility, Andrea Kennedy. I'm not going to give her any introduction. She'll give you a briefing on herself shortly. This session, as always, is being recorded and the webinar will be uploaded to the Purple 365 login area along with a learning resource. You will be able to download this from your company's login area. If you don't know the login details, please email hello@purpletuesday.co and we'll get them sent to you. And of course, if you have any questions for Andrea, just pop them into the chat and she will address them right at the end. Some interesting facts about disabilities. There are 135 million individuals currently in the EU living with disabilities. 15 to 20% of Europeans are neurodivergent. Arthritis is the most common disability in the world. All right, I'll now hand you over to Andrea. She can give a brief introduction and teach us a little bit more. Thanks, Andrea.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Good morning, or good afternoon rather, to all of you. Thanks for joining us on this webinar. Now, usually when we get a webinar that involves a law, it tends to be a little tedious. But this one, not so much, because I'm so excited about it. So, as you can tell, I'm an older female. And I've been in this industry for many years. My name is Andrea Kennedy. I'm the head of accessibility for Purple. But prior to Purple, I've been in the industry since the industry began back in 1995. So that shows how long ago it was. And come 1999, when we had the Old Equality Act, everybody in the disabled community was so excited because there was a change in the Disability Discrimination Act, as it was then, that ensured that not only were the police and armed forces, etc., subject to the Disability Discrimination Act, but also the world of the web and digital products were subject to the Disability Equality Act. So we were incredibly excited about that. That was a major milestone. And now look at us. We've got European standards that will make everybody's life so much easier. So I'm going to run through some of the compliances and the information that you're going to know. It's only a brief guide, okay? It can't possibly be an in-depth guide in just an hour. And as much as I'd love to have you for the next week, it's not feasible. So let's start the presentation. I've said a little bit about myself, and I have literally been in the industry for many, many years. And as we get older, we accumulate disabilities, don't we? I think it's something like over 50 years of age, 52% of us will have accumulated disabilities. So that's quite a lot. And I seem to be collecting them wonderfully, but still, I'm in the community, so that's fine. I do have disabilities myself. If you see me wiggling and squirming a little, I do apologise. I'm recovering from spinal fractures, which, although is no longer painful, is a bit uncomfortable. I'm also dyslexic, so I will frequently say the wrong words, but you'll understand what I mean. And let's go. Okay, so what is the European Accessibility Act? It's something, like I said, that was long awaited, and it's a directive from the European Union that says all products and services, digital and otherwise, but we're focusing on digital now, need to be accessible. So if you have an office in the EU, if you plan on trading in the EU, or if your government abides by EU laws, then you will need to make your goods and services accessible. Now, previously, this demand was only on public bodies. Okay, so local government agencies. But now, thankfully, it includes private bodies. So we're talking about retail and shops and service providers and all kinds of things. Steve just mentioned, there's approximately, and I'm going to say approximately, people with disabilities in the EU. Now, these figures vary wildly, and I'm not sure why. So on the European Union site, it would say 135 million. On other sites, it will say 101 million, and anything in between. So we've got 135 million people that we're really not reaching with all of our products and services. We need to make sure that in the interest of a free market, an open market, an inclusive market, that we include people with disabilities in all of our product offerings. So because we left the EU, now a lot of people still think, well, we left the EU, so we don't need to adhere to this. Actually, we do. There's a law or an act that was passed by the UK government that says they're going to go through all of the European laws and find out which ones we want to keep and which ones we're going to do away with. And I think so far they're only 32% through that. This one, because it's part of the UN ratification as well, United Nations, we are keeping and we will be addressing. And actually, we're pretty much leaders in this field. So yeah, we're definitely sticking to our accessibility guidelines. Pretty much all of Europe will follow these guidelines, and worldwide. They will do exactly the same worldwide. So if we look at worldwide, just for a moment, because even if we trade or we are in the EU, we may want to trade outside the EU worldwide. And it's something that these figures should be known. So when you look about this, we've got 1 billion people, or over 1 billion people in the world that needs an assistive technology. Okay, so that is something that a person would use who has a disability. So for example, if I'm blind, I would use a screen reading software. And that screen reading software would read the computer to me and the websites and the apps, or your mobile. It would read everything to me. So I'm not using any visual skills. I'm listening. It's an auditory skill. So I'm listening to the computer and I'm listening to your website or your application. And that's an assistive technology. Now, there's loads of types of assistive technology. I use some myself called Dragon Naturally Speaking, which is a voice-activated software. So when my arms and hands get tired, I can just use my voice and dictate, which is really, really good because, like I said, I am dyslexic. So it's wonderful. A natural speech and a natural dictation speed. A good type of speed is about 50 words per minute, which I could never, ever achieve. But a natural dictation speed is 130 words per minute, about. So I'm already tripling my output just by using my voice. Now, this is something you'll find as we go further into our discussions. So 1 billion people need assistive technologies. That's a tremendous amount of people. We've got 35 million need prosthetics because they have limb disabilities. 94 million people need hearing aids, which is incredible. 150 million people need cognitive aids. Now, I could go on with these stats and you're probably thinking, why does this apply to my website or my app? Because if your website, we'll say, for example, is not written to code and is not written accessibly, these assistive technologies that the people are using may not be able to interact with it. So you might think you've got a really nice looking product there, digital product. It's looking really smart. It's clean lines. It's logical and intuitive, which is perfect, but it's not accessible to people with disabilities. So it's really important that we keep these people that use assistive technologies in mind all of the time. And like I said, we're accumulating disabilities. We don't know, one of us would need one of these aids at some point. I'm going to digress just a little. On your computers, whether you have a Mac or whether you have a Windows PC, you will have a whole host of assistive technologies on board already available to you at no extra cost. Now, the reason this is there, it's not just out of the goodness of the vendors' hearts, although they do care and they are really addressing needs for people with disabilities. But it's also because, as I've already mentioned, these tools are great. They're not just for people with disabilities, they're actually productivity tools. So you guys can already use the voice activation software I was talking about. You can use the equivalent on Windows, for example, free, no extra charge. You can already dictate to your computer. You can already have your computer read to you. And the reason being, all of these features are so important because as we evolve as a society, we want to make sure that we're catering for every member of our society, whether that's a local or a global society. So just keep in mind these figures because they're incredibly high. By 2030, which is an incredible figure, more than 2 billion people will need assistive technology. Now then, these are just people that need assistive technology, not people with disabilities. That's probably double. A lot of people with disabilities won't need assistive technologies. So tremendously high figures. Okay, so we know we've got a European Accessibility Act, and we know that it follows a standard. So what standard does it follow? It follows the EN 301549, okay, which is a European harmonized standard. Now, harmonized means it's actually in keeping with all laws, accessibility laws throughout. It pretty much was anyway. Every country was following what's called the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines for their digital products. Now, that guideline transfers across, not just digital, you can take it across into many arenas. But the EN 301549 actually is for websites, apps, mobile, and so on. And it's a brilliant standard. Now, as we go further on, I've got some tools for you, and I've got links to these standards for you to be able to pick them up because you're going to need them. But it covers digital products and services, as well as things like electronic documents, even biometrics. It covers an awful lot. So it's WCAG, as we call the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG 2.1 plus. Okay, so what are the benefits? So obviously we've got the benefit of being able to reach a wider audience, which is perfect. So that's good for many reasons, not just because it would increase revenue, it would increase your brand name. There's lots of reasons why reaching a wider market is good, but also for the social value. We are actually making our products accessible to everyone. Now, pretty much all of the organizations that I've worked with since being with Purple and before, when they're given the knowledge on what to do, they run with it because it's something that is close to everybody's heart. So I can well imagine everyone on this webinar has probably got some experience in this already and really is looking for the information to take it forward. So benefits, obviously the common rules, if we're all applying and we're all adhering to the same rules, then it's not going to cost money to step into a new market, for example. If I want to cross over to another European country, I'm operating on exactly the same standards. So that's a cost there, a cost saving there. Other benefits, of course, it improves your brand. obviously it creates loyalty. If your customers are seeing that, wow, look at what they've done for accessibility purposes. This is really catering to me and to my family and friends. It really improves your brand image. It's great for search engine optimization, because we've known for a very long time that accessible websites rank really highly in search engine optimization through things like Google. And of course, we're going to avoid any penalties. Now, I'm going to come in a moment to the policing of this act, and it will be policed, which is good, because if it isn't, it's just empty words. And that's not what we're about. So the benefits are evident. So now we're talking about the digital technologies that it focuses on and that we are going to focus on. And we're looking at things like smartphones, television equipment, ATMs, everything that you can see on the slide in front of you, e-readers, e-books, and so on. Now, in the UK, we've done a lot towards this anyway. Not so much with the private bodies, I will say, but it definitely is something that has been on larger organizations' radars. So we're looking at all of these technologies, and we can relate the standards to them. Okay, so enforcement. This is something that is going to be enforced by the individual member states. So we're not a member of the EU, so we don't have a member state that is going to enforce us, or do we? Actually, we do. So it depends on the individual member state as to what the punishments may be. Okay, obviously we would have fines, and everybody would be made to put the products right, as well as possible fines. But it can go further. Now I've got the Irish European Accessibility Act there, implemented into Irish law. And they actually can give prison sentences for repeat offenders. So this is something that obviously the Irish government are taking very seriously, which I applaud them for. Not that I say everybody should go to prison, but it shows that they really do value accessibility. So we know that these fines can be extortionate. So I don't know whether any of you guys are aware of case law in the past across the world. There has been some amazing case laws brought to my attention of late, and some pretty old ones. One of the most famous one is an American retailer, online retailer, and big, huge shopping centres called Target. Target were fined millions upon millions for an inaccessible product, an inaccessible website. And that's just one old one. There are many. So we've had the possibility of being fined before, but that was just if somebody should decide to bring a case against you. Okay, that wasn't really backed by law. That could only be established in a court of law. So this is the first time that we've actually got standards that are measurable and will apply by law to everybody. The body that will be reporting on all of this is the Equality Advisory and Support Service. Now then, I've put the link there to their website, and it's got a frequently asked question section. It's a useful website anyway for people with disabilities who may want to get more information. There's information there, for example, how do I approach my local government if I have a disability and I can't access a particular service. So it's a good website to know about, to advise people for. But these are the guys that are going to be policing and monitoring the standards and obviously all of our products. So now it comes to the nitty-gritty. What can you guys do about this? Quite a lot, as it turns out. Now then, This is where you suddenly start to think, okay, I'll have a look into what this involves. And then you do a bit of Googling. You go on and you see, okay, what's involved. It can be terrifying to see so many websites, all offering similar advice, but not quite the same. And it can be a little off-putting. But there is a huge resource out there. And there is lots of information if you know where to look. So the first thing you want to do is look at your products. Do you know if they're accessible? Do you know if your digital products have been tested? And not just tested by perhaps your IT guys, but tested by people with disabilities. That's essential. I used to be, or still am, a technical auditor. And even prior to gaining as many disabilities that I have, I considered myself, super knowledgeable. I can audit. There is nothing like a team of user testers with disabilities going through a site. Nobody, even with the best of empathy, will be able to emulate that or repeat that. So you want it tested. You want it tested in-house, if you can. Or you want to test it externally, but it has to be tested by people with disabilities. That's a real must, okay? So two-pronged approach, technical and people with disabilities. Other things you could do is establishing accessibility policies and processes. So, for example, one of your teams has come and said, okay, I've learned what I need to do with regards to the accessibility standards. Here's my app, and it's all singing, all dancing. It's really good. And then he goes off and that knowledge is lost. So all of this information needs to be centralized and looked after within your organization. And the only way to really do that is to establish the necessary policies and processes to ensure that you, one, gain all of the skills, and two, retain them, okay? And three, keep them updated, because standards, as in technology, updates frequently. Once you've got all of those policies in place, and once you've got that knowledge in place, investing in your staff and training is pivotal. As I said, technology evolves, and it evolves incredibly quickly, especially we've got the advent of AI, which has a bearing on accessibility. You want to make sure that your staff are trained up for that and to be able to understand what they need to do and where they need to do, where they need to work, what they need to do and how they need to do it. So training is very important. It's also really great for things like disability awareness in general. And what you may find is that people may have gone through a disability awareness course, and that might have been years ago. And things change, even in the disability world. So these courses are often a great reminder to people about others with disabilities. So it's worth bringing that training course on board. But training is essential. Okay, with everything with your website must be stored and logged. So I'm assuming your website, your product, whatever, will, when it gets feedback, you would have a place to store that information and to review it, frequently review it and see what actions may be needed. Very often, really good comments will come from even disgruntled customers or stakeholders. And very often that information is valid. So it's super to act upon and to review. You need to make sure as part of this act that you inform people of a number of things. One would be like an accessibility statement that informs them of just all the steps you've taken to get your product or your service to be as accessible as possible. It shows your commitment to accessibility and it shows that you value your customers. But it's also good information for a person with a disability to have, because they're going to know, okay, I can see I've got arthritis, this is perfectly keyboard accessible or voice accessible, and I'm going to be fine. So it's good information to have. You've also got to give people the contact information they will need to complain about your website. Okay, so that's to yourselves and to the ESA, the authority that can police. So you've got to provide this information also. And that's a really, really important part of the whole process, is reporting and storing your information and reviewing it frequently. Now, if you don't have the skills to do all that, or perhaps you don't have the bandwidth or the staff to be able to carry out all of this discovery and auditing and training, then obviously speak to people like Purple. We would love to work with you on all of these projects. But engage carefully, make sure that whoever you get on board really understands all about the standards, and make sure that they knowledge share. Okay, that's very important. All of the information that you gather through whatever service will be yours and should be yours at the end of it. But knowledge sharing is very important. If you know something that can benefit somebody else, pass it on. Okay, so this is the actual standard, and I've got some links to it, which you will have, which will be made available to you. And it's a brief introduction to the standard into the digital aspect. Okay, it goes quite deep. It's actually written really well at a good level. One thing we haven't really spoken about yet, but we will do, is the readability, is the understanding, the cognition that we need to take on board information. This is really, really, it's a fascinating subject, and it's really important. So we will go into that somewhat, but only briefly. So like I said, this is a brief guide. So this is the ETSI, which is the European Standard Institute, I think it is. And ETSI, obviously, these are free to download. You're not going to be charged for these. Okay, so the digital aspect of this guide follows the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1. Now, currently we're on 2.2. So any of you in the audience with digital accessibility knowledge will already be a little bit ahead of the game, because you've already got knowledge of the version of 2.2. Things are going to take a lot longer to update European-wise, because there's a lot more states involved. There's a lot of law and legislation that has to be written in each individual country. So things will always move slowly, but nonetheless, they will move. So we've got this principle of POUR, which is perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust, from WCAG 2.1, that we can use to evaluate our products. Now, like I said, a little bit later on towards the end, I won't do it now because it's cheating. There's a lovely little website which shows you some quick checks, which you guys can do yourself. And it gives you a little bit more understanding of what is needed. And there are a few other tools as well that we've got here. Okay, oh, I'm talking so much, I hope I don't go over. Okay, so operable, very, very simple. Make everything operable, okay, regardless of your disability. So I have arthritis, I have a bone condition, and various other things. I sometimes need to use voice activation software. So if you've made a product that's fully keyboard accessible, which means I can just access the website or the product by pressing Tab and Enter, and I can do whatever I want to do just by using those two keys, then I can actually use it by voice. Chances are, if you've got a keyboard accessible website, you've got a voice activation software accessible website or product. So make sure everything is operable regardless of a disability. Make sure that you're giving people enough time to read and use content. Now then, this is a lot more fascinating than that tiny little sentence gives. Rough guide, in the UK, the average reading age for the UK in general is only 9 years of age. Okay, that shocked me. I thought that was incredibly low. But this figure of 9 years of age has been the same for years, many years. I'm trying to find out what the European and the worldwide reading age is, but I don't know if that piece of research has been done yet, but it's quite mind-blowing. So at 9 years of age, if you're targeting a European or a UK audience, then you want to make sure that your products, your pages, your content, your copy is all readable by a 9-year-old. So not as easy as you think it would be. So there's loads of tools out there on the market to simplify your copy and your text. But I've got a few more guidelines in here to do with that. Okay, don't use content that causes seizures or physical reactions. I have actually seen firsthand the effects of an e-learning application on a lady in an organisation in London. And she did not know that she was photosensitive epileptic. But through this e-learning application, she discovered she was, poor thing. So you want to make sure that you don't have too much movement and no blinking and no jazzy movement going back and forth. Movement is something that we can characterize between a change in shape and color. Okay, so it's not just something that goes across the screen. It's going to be a change in shapes and colors, the speed that they change, the colors that they change. You don't want anything that's going to bring on any kind of seizure. So keep that movement fully controllable by the user and minimized. Help users navigate and find out where they are. Something as simple as making sure that you've got 2 ways to look around a website. So I might want to use the search box, or I might want to look on the sitemap. You know, at least 2 ways to find something on your website or within your product. And make it easier to use inputs other than keyboard. Now, we've just discovered that if it's keyboard accessible, it's voice accessible. And that's the same for many other tools, such as scanning softwares for people that perhaps use sip and puff devices, where you would use your mouth or your eyes to move next. There are many scanning facilities out there where there's a little camera, perhaps on a wheelchair or something similar, and the camera is focused on the person's retina. And instead of enter and tab, which we would use on a keyboard, they may use one blink and another blink, enter and tab. There's lots of different ways for eye tracking and so on. So if it's keyboard accessible, it's going to be accessible by all those devices too. The next one is understandable. And as I said, make text readable and understandable and keep it to a correct reading age. We used to love the sound of our own voices when we were typing away, and it used to be the more complex and jargony, the more important you sound, and yeah, that sounds really good. I used to do that myself many years ago until I realized nobody can understand what on earth you're saying. So really simplify your text. Plus, we're also busy in this day and age. We haven't got time to sit and learn something. We want to look at it, understand it, and we're gone. So readability is really important. Make things operate in a predictive way or a predictable way. Sometimes designers seem to think that if it's tried and tested and it's commonly used, that it's boring. No, not boring. Commonly used, predictable, perfect. Because, like I said, we're so fast as well. We want to be able to get on and do things. So for cognitive users, I need to anticipate where to go next without learning it. And just for everybody, you want that familiarity so you can just hit the ground running. So make things operate in a predictable fashion. And make sure that you can help users avoid and correct mistakes. Now, any of you guys, because I can't see the audience, retailers, there are a number of checkpoints that you need to address. So, for example, if anybody is going to make a binding contract by clicking a button on your website, they need to be able to review it, reverse it, lots of different changes. So we can cover those, but there's quite a few in retail that you need to be aware of. But just generally, are you sure you want to press enter on this? And that would be it. But it really does help. The next is perceivable. This is something that most of us probably will understand, and what most of us would probably think accessibility is. So if I can't see the website, you've got to make sure that all non-text content, whether that's images or image maps or movies or audio, all of it has a text equivalent. Whether that's as simple as an alternative text on an image, or a subtitled movie with audio description, for example. Create content that can be presented in different ways without losing meaning. This is quite an old guideline, an old rule of thumb, but one that is kind of timeless. So if, for example, your website is gorgeous and glossy and looks fab, and then I tend to turn the styles off because I want a linear view, I can't look at all this jazziness and all these pictures and all these colors. I might be neurodivergent. There could be many reasons. And I want to turn off the styles and I just want to look at the text. If you've changed it, the order of the website by CSS, and once that CSS is removed and the website is all over the place, that's not making it easy for me to see. Okay, so whether you've got CSS, JavaScript, whatever's running, make sure that if I disable those, I can still see what I'm looking at and I can still see your content. Easier for users to see and hear. Anybody with audio on their website or background noise, or background audio, sorry, on their website, there are certain, I think it's 80 decibels. It has to be 80 decibels lower than the spoken content. So there's quite a few checkpoints that adhere to things that you see and hear, and they're measurable and they're easily understandable. Whether you look at WCAG 2.1 or whether you look at this standard, it's the same thing, but definitely worth looking at because it's so important for people to be able to perceive this information. And robust. This is kind of a catch-all, really, but it's got to be robust. You've got to be able to make things forward compatible as well as backward compatible. Okay, so you want to make sure that your tools are not the oldest softwares in the land, that you're using the latest technologies, that you're completely dedicated to being innovative and developing more and more, not just developing something once and then hoping to use that for the next 20 years. It's not how technology rolls. So maximize compatibility with current and future tools. Now then, I know that we're racing past and I'm a little over, which is quite gutting because I love chatting, and unfortunately I could keep you here for the next 2 or 3 hours, but I know I'm not allowed. So these I'm going to show you now are posters that were created by the Cabinet Office, and they are fab. Okay, they're really good. If you know developers, designers, content authors, and you think they may benefit from these, then send them on. The Cabinet Office did a really great job when they produced these, and they've been around for quite some time now, but they're still relevant. They're also great for literally printing and putting up on people's wall. But anyway, it's got hints and tips for many users. So we've got hints and tips for screen readers, such as make sure that all images have an alt text, for example, or make sure that you've got a logical and hierarchical heading structure. So that's just a couple of them. I know I've only got a few minutes left. For low vision, for example, it says, do use a good color contrast. Don't use a really poor color contrast, such as orange and white. Color contrast is really, really important and probably the most abused compliance of all of them. Okay, people tend to have fun with their colors, not realizing the difficulty that people can have with colors, people with visual perception disorders. So low vision, as well as those with visual perception differences, will need to adhere to these. Okay, people with dyslexia, or anyone that's neurodiverse, and there's many, many, many of us. If you are neurodiverse, then these are going to be great for you. So don't use large blocks of text, heavy text. Don't use large blocks of italics, or don't justify your text. Oh, I hate justified text. When we read, we actually looking at the characters, we're identifying the characters, and we're identifying them by the shape. So when you take away that shape, for example, justified text spaces out all of the characters. So a word is rather spaced and stretched. So when you take away that natural shape, you're then taking away the ability to anticipate what that word is. So what you really want to do is make sure that you keep natural flows to make things far easier. So don't use blocks of italics, or don't use blocks of underlining, and so on. Keep your sentence structure nice and succinct and to the point. Make your paragraphs 7 sentences or less. These are all commonly used guidelines, whether you're looking at the Plain English campaign or whatever. There's many campaigns out there. But these are just simple techniques that can really make a difference to readability. And autism. On the autism spectrum, there are so many things that we need to address when we're developing. One thing I was particularly bad at was speaking in idioms and typing in idioms. And I didn't realize how bad I was. For example, you've got an image there with an umbrella and cats and dogs. Now, it's fairly easily understandable. It's raining cats and dogs. Not to me. I couldn't get that at all. I had to be told what that was. And I'm one of the worst culprits for using idioms. Yeah, so these posters are absolutely wonderful. We've got them for physical and motor disabilities, deaf and the hard of hearing, and for those with anxiety. Now, I want you to pay particular attention to this. This is something that everybody is now understanding, that after the pandemic, or during the pandemic, we faced a lot of tragedy and struggles as a world, as a human population. And it had significant effects on many people. And those effects are still with many people. So we want to make sure that we are designing products and services that are stress-free, that I don't need to learn or struggle to understand what X, Y, or Z is. So designing for anxiety is really, or designing to not give users anxiety is really important. Okay, the last couple of minutes, I'm all right for another minute, Stephen, I hope.
Yeah, go ahead. There's some extra time.
I wasn't even listening for your answer then, so sorry. Okay, so a couple of tools, and that's worth having. Okay, W3C Easy Checks. Now, these are the guys that made the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 and 2, etc. And they've got a lovely little page that explains to you some easy checks. And I've got a video there as well in this PowerPoint. If you were to click on that, you would see a little video. But some lovely little easy checks that you can do to get a rough idea of just how accessible your product is, your digital product. And WCAG 2.1 primer. This again is really good. So this is just a checklist. So if you can answer on this website, it's got a list of questions. And if you can answer yes or not applicable to all of those questions, then you've passed. Yay, you're WCAG 2.1 compliant. So this little checklist, where you can tick yes, no, not applicable, will tell you what you need to do to your product. A really useful resource to have. Okay, when this gets sent around to you guys, we've got the standard itself at the top there, the directive that it came from, okay, which is the European Union directive. Then I've given you the EasyCheck website and the Primer website. Now then, as Stephen said, there were a couple of facts and stats. The 135 million, the 135 million individuals. Okay, take that with a pinch of salt. Depends on whose website you go on, and who is different to EU, for example. So yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot of people. 25 to 30% of Europeans are neurodivergent. That does not surprise me at all. There are many neurodivergent people about. From when we're born, we're brought up to think sequentially, A to Z, 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. Not everybody can think sequentially. I certainly can't. And I'm a nightmare to work with, but yeah, I think spatially. And arthritis, unfortunately, is the most common disability in the world, and that can have amazing effects on how somebody interacts with your website, whether that's using their hands and arms, etc., or even their eyes. Okay, there's a lot of issues with arthritis. But yeah, very, very interesting subject. And that is it. Let me have a look. Have I got any more here? Okay, and now we're on to Q&A.
Yeah, if anyone has any questions for Andrea, just put them into the little chat box. We'll leave a couple of minutes and see if anyone has.
I hope you've got some, guys. Please put some in.
We'll give it another minute, Andrea, and see if anyone has anything for you at the moment.
Brilliant. Taryn, what a brilliant comment. Wonderful, thank you. A click away value pound in the UK, as Taryn has put in the chat, 274 billion. Wow, that's incredible. And yeah, you're right, Taryn, it is incredibly exciting times ahead. And something that people with disability never thought we'd see coming, and it's just so exciting. But Taryn, thank you. Superb comment, thank you.
All right, that doesn't seem to... Oh, here we go. Taryn's given you another question.
Oh, fab. I don't believe we have. So you mentioned that the UK will be monitored along with the EU from June 2025. Have we received word from the UK Gov on that? Now, I've been out searching. I searched my little socks off to find that answer. And Taryn, if you got it, I would be delighted. But I couldn't find it. I couldn't find that answer. You did, yeah, you heard correctly. It's being monitored, but there is no, because we're not a nation state, we're not on any lists. If you go onto the European Union website, you can see a list of all the member states and the policing authorities, the monitoring authorities. And of course, we don't have one in the UK because we're not a nation state of the European Union. But if you go onto the Gov website, it tells you that all websites, regardless of whether they're public or private, are monitored by ESA. I think it's ESA it's called. But yeah, if you find any information out, Taryn, let me know.
Well, if anyone has any more questions for Andrea that you would prefer answered privately, just drop me an email and I'll pass them on to Andrea. Thanks, Andrea, for that. Thanks for your slides and educating us a little bit more. I know I certainly learned one or two things, and I know you've helped me out with the website. Some key takeaways from Andrea's slide is from June 2025, public and private bodies will be subject to accessibility laws. all digital services will be included in the law. So organizations need to act now. This is the beginning of the process, and it's best to get a head start. And that's it. Oh, we've got another question for you. Might as well throw that one in, Andrew, just before we leave. Are
Anthony,
there any
yes,
examples of good websites currently compliant?
there are, but not that I can find to Etsy standard. Okay, so we've got quite a lot that are 2.1, and they're fairly easy to find. But I wanted to find one that took into account the ICT and things such as biometrics and so on. And I haven't come to them yet, but I will have a look. Enable All is a lovely little tool, but it's not going to be able to reach. Oh, sorry, Enable All. I was thinking of something else. Yeah, that with Enable All input will be able to reach the Etsy standard. Enable All do it differently. It's not like some of these plugins that you see where you just plug it in and then Bob's your uncle and it says we make everything really accessible. Unfortunately, they don't. But Enable All actually have a plugin, then they work with you, and they go through complete an audit really of your site, and then areas that need to be adjusted, they'll adjust. So yeah, it's Enable All would do that easily.
So for those of you that are unaware, enableall.com is the first truly accessible website. So if you've got some time, just pop onto the website. It's easy enough, and just go have a look. They've got some great deals on there.
It's a retail portal, and it's a new marketplace, that's right. And I'm not looking because I know I will buy something, which I'm trying to get away from. But yeah, Enable All will do that, no problem. And something I think that we really need to let people know about, because in all seriousness, there's a lot of stress. Many developers and organizations are stressed to death about this new monitoring that's coming out in June 25. And I don't blame them. It's all very well me getting excited and yay, we can't wait. But I'm not their side of the problem. So I can understand totally how terrified some people will be, or some organizations will be. We need to let the retailers know about Enable All, because that will just take away that grief for them. Yeah. So if you do know retailers, please spread the word.
Cool. Well, I think that is it, Andrea. Thank you very much. For those of you still watching, please book the next webinars in your diary. The next one will be Building an Inclusive Workplace, coming up on the 18th of June. As I said earlier, these will be uploaded into the website in the next day or two. And if you have any questions, just drop me an email. So thank you guys all for watching. And Andrea, thank you for taking time to come teach us.
My pleasure. Take care, everybody.
Well, you guys have a
See you
good day.
soon. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.